The ancient, massive trees of Sequoia National Park's famed giant forest continue to avoid a wildfire that's been threatening them in California's Sierra Nevada for nearly 2 weeks. CAL FIRE spokesman Mark Garrett said Tuesday that so far there's been no damage to any of the trees. The K&P complex of 2 lightning-sparked fires that merged has spread over more than 39 square miles. The blaze has been feeding on other types of trees on the high-elevation mountain slopes. To the south, the windy fire in the giant Sequoia National Monument has scorched part of at least one of the giant trees. I'm Max Springle. News returns at 7:30 on KPFA.
It is just past 7:08 in the morning. You're listening to Upfront. I'm Brian Edwards-Teeker.
And I'm Kat Brooks. More than 7,000 wildfires in California this year have damaged or destroyed more than 3,000 homes and other buildings and torched well over 3,000 square miles of land. We turn our attention now to the fires that are threatening the giant sequoias in Northern California. We're joined by Tony Caprio, fire ecologist for the Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks, as well as Christy Brigham, Chief of Resources Management and Science for the Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm not sure who wants to start, but what do we know about what started the fires that are threatening the area?
Both fires were started by lightning ignitions. I think it was the evening of the 9th of September.
And what is exacerbating them? What is helping the spread, and what is making them difficult to contain?
Well, it's very dry conditions this year.
One other factor playing a role is the steep terrain. So where both fires started, very rough terrain and inaccessible, and like Tony said, with really high tree mortality from climate change-driven hotter drought.
There was a little bit of access in one area, but again, they were using aircraft to try to slow the fire.
I read a story yesterday about, I believe it was yesterday, about 4 of the largest trees being saved from burning. What protective measures were put in place, and what trees are we talking about, Christy?
Tony actually went and helped develop those measures with me and another team, and Tony was in the field. Those are the 4 guardsmen. We were very concerned about them because they're on a slope and they had heavy fuels nearby. And Tony and Josh James developed standards to rake around those trees to remove the fuels and keep the fire away from the trunk and also protect the roots. And then the team also wrapped the trunks in structure wrap to keep embers out of old fire scars on the trunk. And then thankfully that area burned under an inversion, and so fire did not get up into the crown, which the treatments wouldn't really help with that, but the weather did. And Tony, what am I missing about what else was done for the 4 guardsmen?
So the 4 guardsmen, the one thing about the 4 guardsmen, they were in an area where we had never done any prescribed burns, so that meant the fuel loads in there were very high. I think one of the big things we need to understand about giant forest is that we've done a lot of burn treatments in that area, and that protected a lot of the sequoias up there. So we didn't need to do as much aggressive suppression activities around the trees like we had to do around the 4 guardsmen.
What's different about wildfires in 2021?
So that's because, as I mentioned, we've excluded fires for so long, the fuel loads are extremely heavy. So if the conditions are just right, such as last year during the Castle fire, we had fires that were so severe they were getting into the crowns of the giant sequoias and burning the trees from top to bottom. Their trees are adapted to fires that are more of an understory burn, that burn under the trees. There may be some small pockets of heat, and that tends to put a little bit of heat in the crown, and that they have what's called a serotinous cone, and that cone opens up with heat and releases a seed. When you have these high severity fires, those crowns burn and kill.
And is a crown fire a death sentence for the trees? I mean, we had fires crown out on the coast here in coastal redwoods, but a lot of them are bouncing back from that now. They throw out McCormick buds out of their trunks.
the redwoods sprout, giant sequoias do not sprout. So when crown fire kills a sequoia tree, it does not come back.
Go ahead, Tony.
Oh, so what we're concerned about is these areas where you have these high severity crown fires and giant sequoia growth, that might be type converted to some other vegetation type that the sequoias will not come back.
You mean they like permanently become meadows or something?
Yeah, or shrublands.
Or shrublands. Christy Brigham, you mentioned that the park has done a lot of prescribed burns in a lot of areas in the past. Have you been in to assess how differently those parts of the park fared than the ones that had, been subject to nonstop fire suppression?
That's a great question, and the right person to answer that is actually Tony. Let me tell the little story on my side. I have been into Board Camp Grove with Tony that burned last year in the Castle Fire that's on a slope and had not had prescribed fire, and it is devastated. It had crown fire in a huge area. We saw almost no seedlings. All the sequoias in the center part of the grove are completely dead. They are not resprouting. They're dead. Now, Tony assessed the rough fire after that had burned through previously treated and untreated sequoia groves, and has looked at heat signature maps from this fire in areas with either previous wildfire history or prescribed fire history. Tony, you want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing?
Yeah, so what we're seeing in the giant forest area, there was a pretty good run of the fire up the Marble Fork, and it hit the west edge of the forest, and that some of the portions of that west edge we've done prescribed burns. Some of them we've entered the area twice, and the fire basically hit those prescribed burns and dropped down. Some of them it didn't even burn into the areas where we've done the prescribed burns, and so the fire crews have had a relatively easy time managing the fire in those areas. So it's been a well worthwhile effort over the last decades to prepare those areas.
So looking ahead, like how much more prescribed burning does that forest need? If you want to protect existing grand sequoia groves, like what's the prescribed fire deficit right now?
So, I mean, once we get fire in there, we probably need to go back in every 15 years or so to maintain those areas. And so it usually takes the first restoration fire, and then you need to get back in there one or two more times before it really starts to look good.
And to just tag on to that briefly, the problem that we have such a great prescribed fire program, but it's not big enough. So in a good year, we can burn 1,000 acres. We've been very focused on Giant Forest, Grant Grove, and Redwood Mountain Grove, which are some of our largest and best groves. But that has left over 30 groves in more remote areas that are almost untreated or totally untreated. And now with climate change and wildfire season, the burn windows are narrow to non-existent. So we are really looking at restorative thinning, pile burning, winter burning, all of the options to try and protect whatever groves remain unburned after this latest wildfire event.
Christy, start with you. Talk about what makes these trees so special and what losing them would mean.
Thankfully, it's not just me. You can tell from your reader interest and how much coverage and the 2 million visitors a year, people love these trees. To stand next to them, they are really big. The biggest ones maybe take 10 to 15 people to give a single tree a hug. They tower above us 200 feet tall. The first branches are often 100 feet or more off the ground. Their bark is actually soft and shaggy for a tree, kind of like I call them the golden retrievers of the tree world. People really relate to these trees and connect to their longevity, the peacefulness of standing among them, the joy of being around such amazing, old, magnificent trees. Beyond that, they're great at storing carbon, so they're helping us solve climate change. They're really important habitat for old growth dependent species. They hold the soil in place. They produce oxygen. They help with water and storing snow, holding snow on the ground. They're just magnificent and important to us in so many ways. And when they burn up after having survived countless previous fires, 80 to 100 previous fires, and you see their blackened, standing there, giant sticks against the sky. I don't know too many people who don't cry when they see that.
Tony? Tony, you still there? Is there anything you'd like to add about these trees?
Yeah, I think she described it very, very well. They're just remarkable trees when you're up in the groves. I mean, they're just a structure of the tree and these huge branches and all.
And the second half of that question is what does it mean? What does it mean for the area? What does it mean? I guess we could even go for our emotional selves. But also scientifically, if we lose them, and what would recovery take like? And I guess it wouldn't be anything that we saw in our lifetime.
Right. So many of these trees are 2,000 years old or more. So when you lose a grove of that age, just think of how long it's going to take for that area to recover. I mean, it'll probably be 500 to 700 years before you start to get large trees in those areas.
Christy, you sound like you were going to say something else.
Yeah, just that from a scientific standpoint, we don't know what it would mean to the ecosystem, but it wouldn't be good. I mean, you're talking about the loss of teragrams of carbon that will be breaking down, and the loss of these trees that sequester carbon every year for thousands of years, not to mention all the old growth dependent species, what it might mean to water cycling and snow storage to convert these forests to shrublands. We have no idea what it would mean for snow, for water, for biodiversity, for air quality, for carbon storage, for keeping soil out of our rivers. We hope to never find out, honestly.
Great. Do y'all have any requests to the public, pleas to the public, asks of folks who love these trees? Is there anything that folks can do to help now, or is it just wait and watch and see?
Just give the trees good thoughts,
And I would say, yeah, definitely give the trees good thoughts. Hope for weather that is not windy. But beyond that, we know climate change is part of this problem. So please do what you can individually and collectively to address climate change. And then here in California, we need more prescribed fire, and we need more restorative thinning. So support those efforts. I know nobody likes the smoke from prescribed fire, and it worries us, but it's a heck of a lot better than what we're living through right now. So public support for forest restoration, restorative thinning, prescribed fire, and doing what we can for climate change will really help after this fire is over, doing the real work to protect these forests from future fires that we know are coming.
All right. Anything that I have not asked either of you that you feel like folks need to know before we wrap up here?
I don't want people to feel hopeless. We have a lot of hope. These trees are fire resistant. They have survived for thousands of years. And if we can get it together, we have time. Climate change is not hopeless. Forest management is not hopeless. Fire resilience is not hopeless. We just need to act and get it together. So I don't want people to not feel hopeful that we can address these problems.
Right, and the sooner we act, the better off the trees and these forests will be.
Right. All right, well, we will leave it on that kind of an up note. Thank you both so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've been speaking to Christy Brigham, Chief of Resources Management and Science for the Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks, as well as Tony Caprio, Fire Ecologist for the Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks. Here on Upfront, I'm Kat Brooks.
And I'm Brian Edwards-Teeker.